April 2. Liaquat Ali Khan meets Jawaharlal Nehru in New Delhi to ease tensions between India and Pakistan and discuss the protection of minorities. April 3rd. The television standard aspect ratio officially changes from 5 by 4 to 4 by 3, which will dominate until the digital era and the rise of 16 by 9. April 4. The UN proposal to internationalize Jerusalem is rejected by both Israel, which controls the western sector, and Jordan, which controls the east. April 5. At a private dinner hosted by James Van Allen, scientists propose an international cooperative program that will later become the International Geophysical Year. April 6. A deadly train crash in Tangua, Brazil kills over 100 people. On the same day, Dr. Charles P. Bailey performs the first successful human test of an instrument to dilate the aortic valve. April 7. The U.S. adopts NSC 68, a secret Cold War strategy document focused on containing the USSR. The Soviet Union creates a new executive council of 5 members around Stalin, Beria, Bulganin, Molotov, and Kaganovich. April 8. Soviet fighters shoot down a U.S. Navy reconnaissance plane over the Baltic region, killing all 10 crew members. At MIT, scientists capture the first X-ray image of an atomic arrangement. April 9. During a live televised Easter Mass at Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, leftist activists interrupt the service with a provocative declaration that God is dead. April 10. The U.S. Supreme Court refuses to hear the appeal of the Hollywood 10, upholding their convictions for contempt of Congress. April 13. Communist China promulgates a new marriage law, abolishing forced marriages and polygamy while granting women equal rights to divorce and property. April 14. The first issue of the British comic book, The Eagle, is published, featuring the character Dan Dare. April 15. Massive flooding of the Red River forces 100,000 people to evacuate in Manitoba, Canada. In Belgium, King Leopold III offers to suspend his powers to end a political crisis. April 16. Chinese Communist forces launch an assault on Hainan Island, controlled by Chinese nationalists, leading to its capture days later. April 17. The first Congress of Cambodian Communists is held, gathering 200 delegates, half of them Buddhist monks, to organize resistance against French colonial rule. April 18. The Avro Canada C-102 jetliner carries mail between Toronto and New York in under an hour, a milestone for jet aviation. April 19. The USSR and the People's Republic of China signed their first trade agreement, deepening their alliance. April 20. The CIA launches Project Bluebird, an early Cold War program to explore mind control techniques using drugs and hypnosis. April 21. In Nainital, India, a Gurkha soldier goes on a rampage, killing 22 people in a caste-related dispute. On the same day, the USSR announces the final repatriation of most Japanese prisoners of war, while keeping some for trial. April 22. Communist forces complete their takeover of Hainan Island. April 24. Jordan formally annexes the West Bank and grants citizenship to its Palestinian inhabitants. April 27. The United Kingdom officially recognizes both the State of Israel and Jordan's annexation of the West Bank. April 28. The communist government of Czechoslovakia dissolves the Greek Catholic Uniate Church, forcing its members to join the Orthodox Church or the Roman Catholic Church. On April 5, a small dinner gathering in Maryland planted the seed for one of the most ambitious scientific collaborations of the 20th century. Hosted by space scientist James Van Allen, the evening brought together a handful of influential researchers, including Lloyd Berkner and Sidney Chapman. During the discussion, Berkner proposed a bold idea: a worldwide, coordinated effort to study the Earth's atmosphere, oceans, and magnetic fields, much like the earlier International Polar Years, but on a global scale. This idea would eventually evolve into the International Geophysical Year, IGY, held in 1957-58. The IGY broke political barriers at the height of the Cold War, uniting scientists from both East and West. It led to landmark discoveries, including the Van Allen radiation belts, and paved the way for the first generation of space exploration missions. What began as a simple dinner conversation would ultimately reshape how nations cooperate in science. On April 8, 1950, scientists at MIT unveiled what they called the first photograph of an atom. It wasn't a snapshot like a camera image. Instead, they used X-ray diffraction to capture the arrangement of atoms inside the mineral marcasite, magnified more than 10 million times. For the first time, the invisible world of atoms could be translated into a visual pattern, showing how matter is built from tiny repeating structures. This breakthrough confirmed decades of theory, turning the atom from an abstract idea into something people could actually see. The technique would soon become central to modern science. Just 3 years later, X-ray diffraction images revealed the double helix of DNA, one of the most important discoveries of the century. In that sense, the 1950 image was a milestone, the first glimpse of a hidden universe, opening the door to structural chemistry, molecular biology, and the technologies that followed. In the same month, a quieter but equally profound breakthrough appeared, not in a lab, but on paper. Mathematician Richard Hemming, working at Bell Labs, published his revolutionary paper, Error Detecting and Error Correcting Codes. To understand its importance, imagine the early days of computers and long-distance communication. Information, whether punched into cards or sent over a wire, was fragile. A single dropped bit, a misread punch card, or a noisy telephone line could corrupt an entire calculation or message. At the time, engineers could only detect some of these errors, but they couldn't automatically fix them. Hemming's paper changed everything. He introduced a mathematical system, now known as Hamming codes, that allowed machines not just to detect errors, but to correct them automatically, without human intervention. His concept of Hamming distance became a fundamental tool in computer science, measuring how different two pieces of data are and guiding error correction. Today, this breakthrough is everywhere, in the way data is stored on hard drives and memory chips, how satellites transmit images from space, how your phone sends texts or streams video, and even how the internet itself works reliably, despite constant noise and interference. In 1950, very few realized its impact, but Hemming's work quietly laid the mathematical foundation for the digital world, making modern computing and global communications possible. In April 1950, animation was a world in flux, still anchored in the golden age of theatrical cartoons, but slowly feeling the tug of new media. Among the highlights is a new short in the beloved Tom and Jerry series, Jerry and the Lion, released on April 8. Meanwhile, studios like Walter Lantz are preparing for revival, investing in new Woody Woodpecker shorts that will keep audiences in theaters. On the frontier between comics and animation, experimental TV shows such as Telecomics are beginning to unfold, presenting still panels with narration and limited motion, nudging us toward what will become television cartoons. On April 8, 1950, the New Yorker published a short story by a young writer named J.D. Salinger. At first glance, it seemed like another war story in a post-world filled with then. But this piece, for Esmé, with love and squalor, struck readers with its unusual mix of tenderness and darkness. The story begins in a quiet English village during the war. A young American soldier meets a precocious 13-year-old girl, Esmé, and her little brother. They share tea, conversation, and a brief human connection amid the chaos of wartime Europe. Later, when the same soldier suffers a mental breakdown from the horrors he has endured, Esmé's simple, heartfelt letter becomes a lifeline, a fragile thread pulling him back towards sanity. Salinger himself had fought on D-Day and witnessed the liberation of concentration camps, leaving him deeply scarred. Rather than write a heroic tale, he created something quieter, a portrait of trauma, healing, and the small mercies that make survival possible. The story was instantly praised for its emotional honesty and subtlety. It cemented Salinger's reputation as a writer to watch 4 years before the publication of his legendary novel, The Catcher in the Rye. Even today, for Esmé is studied for its intimate look at the invisible wounds of war and how literature can capture both the squalor and the love left in its wake. While Salinger was quietly exploring individual trauma, on the other side of the world, another writer aimed for epic scale. In 1950, Chilean poet Pablo Neruda published Canto General, the General Song, a monumental work of over 15,000 lines of poetry. Written in secret and often printed clandestinely, it told the sweeping story of Latin America, its landscapes, its people, and its centuries of struggle against colonialism and oppression. The opening sections celebrate the natural world, vast mountains, ancient forests, rivers as lifeblood of the continent. But as the book unfolds, Neruda's voice turns political and urgent. He denounces the exploitation by foreign powers, the suffering of workers, and the betrayals of corrupt elites. At its heart, Canto General is both a song of beauty and a call to resistance. Because Neruda was a communist and outspoken critic of tyranny, the book's publication was dangerous. In Chile, where his party was persecuted, copies were smuggled and shared in secret. The first official edition came out in Mexico, safe from censorship, but its verses quickly spread across Latin America and beyond. This work became a kind of literary flag for an entire generation of activists and dreamers. Even now, many consider Canto General to be the defining epic of Latin American identity, a poetic counterpart to the revolutions and social movements that would shape the second half of the 20th century. In April 1950, the #1 song in the United States wasn't a big band classic or a torch ballad. It was a playful tune with a mouthful of a title. If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. Written by Al Hoffman, Bob Merrill, and Clem Watts. The song had a simple, irresistible premise. A woman playfully regrets not being prepared when an unexpected guest drops by. It's light-hearted, humorous, and deeply domestic, the perfect post-war fantasy of home and hospitality. The version that topped the charts was sung by Eileen Barton, a young vocalist whose warm, lively delivery gave the lyrics a charming wink. Released in early 1950 by National Records, it exploded in popularity that spring, selling over 1 million copies, an extraordinary feat at the time. Part of its success came from radio and television, which were rapidly reshaping American culture. The song's catchy chorus made it ideal for radio play, and its domestic imagery fit perfectly with the rise of TV variety shows and cooking programs in the early 1950s. It was the soundtrack of a country settling into suburban comfort after the upheavals of war. Musically, it bridged two eras. It still had the swing and bounce of the 1940s big band sound, but its short, catchy structure hinted at the pop format that would soon dominate the charts, paving the way for rock and roll later in the decade. The title itself became a cultural catchphrase. It was referenced in comedy routine, variety shows, and even recipes. For a brief moment, if I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. Wasn't just a song, it was a symbol of a cheerful, optimistic America entering the 1950s with a smile. On April 14, 1950, British comics entered a new era with the launch of Eagle, printed in high quality color and packed with exciting, morally complex stories. Eagle set a new standard for children's comics in the post-war world. Its star feature, Dan Dare, pilot of the future, introduced readers to bold space adventures, combining science fiction with the optimism of the new atomic age. Dan Dare would go on to become a cultural icon in the UK, influencing generations of artists and writers and even inspiring adaptations on radio and television. Meanwhile, in the United States, EC Comics began shifting two of its crime series toward full horror, planting the seeds of what would soon become legendary titles like Tales from the Crypt. Samuel Alito, born on April 1, rose to become a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, shaping major decisions and leaving a lasting mark on American law. Christy Latty, born on April 4, built a distinguished career as an actress and director, earning an Academy Award nomination and an Emmy for her powerful performances. Agneta Feltskog, born on April 5, found worldwide fame as the golden voice of ABBA, the Swedish pop phenomenon whose songs still echo across generations. Franklin R. Chang Diaz, born on April 5, became a NASA astronaut and later a pioneer in plasma propulsion technology, pushing the boundaries of space exploration. Kenneth D. Cockrell, born on April 9, flew 5 missions as a NASA astronaut, contributing to America's achievements aboard the Space Shuttle. Bill Irwin, born on April 11, captivated audiences as a master of physical theater, blending clowning, stagecraft, and acting into a Tony Award-winning career. David Cassidy, born on April 12, rose to teen idol status in the 1970s with the Partridge Family, charming millions as both singer and actor. Joyce Banda, born on April 12, made history as the first female president of Malawi, breaking barriers and becoming a trailblazer in African politics. Ron Perlman, born on April 13, became a cult favorite with unforgettable roles in Hellboy, Quest for Fire, and Sons of Anarchy. Francis Collins, born on April 14, led the Human Genome Project and emerged as one of the most influential scientists of his generation. Peter Esterhazy, born on April 14, was celebrated as one of Hungary's greatest modern novelists, whose works reached readers far beyond his homeland. Peter Frampton, born on April 22, became a rock legend. His electrifying guitar and iconic live album, Frampton Comes Alive, inspiring generations of fans. Peter Hinze, born on April 25, rose as a leading figure in Germany's CDU. remembered for his close collaboration with Chancellor Angela Merkel. Jay Leno, born on April 28, reigned for decades as host of The Tonight Show, a household name in American television and comedy. Debbie Stabenow, born on April 29, built a long and influential career as U.S. Senator from Michigan, becoming a key Democratic voice in Washington. Kurt Weill, passing on April 3 at the age of 50, was a composer who bridged continents and cultures. Born in Germany in 1900, he first rose to fame in the Weimar Republic with works like the Threepenny Opera, written with Bertolt Brecht, which gave the world the enduring standard. Mac the Knife, forced to flee Nazi Germany, he rebuilt his career in America, bringing European modernism into Broadway and Hollywood. In the United States, he created musicals such as Lady in the Dark and Street Scene, blending classical sophistication with the rhythms of jazz and popular song. His marriage to singer Lotte Lenya further fueled his legacy as she carried his music to new audiences after his death. Weill's ability to mix sharp political commentary with accessible melodies made him a unique voice in 20th century music. His death in New York cut short a life of innovation, but his songs, at once biting, tender, and timeless, continue to resonate on stages worldwide. Vaslav Nijinsky, who died on April 8 at 60, was one of the most electrifying dancers of all time. Born in 1889 in Kiev to a family of dancers, he achieved legendary status with Sergei Diaghilev's Ballets Russes in Paris before World War I. Nijinsky was celebrated for his extraordinary leaps, his magnetic stage presence, and his daring choreography. Works like La Presse Midi d'un Fond and Le Sacré du Printemps shocked audiences and redefined modern ballet, blending primal energy with radical movement. Yet his meteoric career was tragically cut short. By the early 1920s, he had succumbed to schizophrenia and spent much of the rest of his life in seclusion and hospitals. Though he performed publicly for only a few years, his influence was immense, inspiring choreographers, dancers, and artists for generations. Nijinsky's death in London closed the final chapter of a life both brilliant and tragic, a reminder of genius burning too brightly, too briefly, yet leaving an indelible mark on the art of dance. Ramana Maharshi, who passed away on April 14 at 70, was one of India's most revered spiritual teachers. Born Venkataraman Iyer in 1879, he experienced a profound awakening as a teenager, which led him to settle at the sacred mountain of Arunachala in southern India. There he lived in simplicity, attracting seekers from around the world. Ramana's central teaching was the practice of self-inquiry, asking, "Who am I?" as the path to liberation. Unlike many gurus, he discouraged rituals and complex doctrines, pointing instead to the silent presence of awareness itself. Western philosophers, writers, and even scientists visited him, drawn by his serenity and the universality of his message. In his final years, thousands gathered daily at his ashram, and when he died, devotees reported a brilliant star crossing the sky. Ramana Maharshi's passing marked not an end, but the continuation of an influence that spread far beyond India, making him a guiding light in modern spirituality and interfaith dialogue.